I was told long ago, I believe what I was told. I was told Jesus is coming soon. I was just a child when I was told, just a lad, but now I am grown, and I still believe he's coming soon.
Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate being with you. Good to talk to you.
Listen, it's good to talk with you again. You are one of my heroes.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Listen, I want
it's
you
good to be back with you.
I've been a long-time fan of Ball Builders. I've gotten a lot of your material over the years. Especially, I loved your Constitution Alive series. And your America's Godly Heritage, that 10 DVD series, blew me away. Yeah, I love your material, and it's been a blessing to myself and my family. And I want to personally thank you for the work that you and your organization are doing, educating the American public about the history of our nation, and for being steadfast and taking a stand against the revisionism that's being propagated by the left.
Yeah.
And the rewriting of our history and the twisting of the meaning and purpose of our Constitution. You guys are on the front line of that work, and I really appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you, brother. It's our pleasure to be there, and we enjoy getting to engage. And it's always fun whenever you can put truth out, whatever that is. Even if people don't like it, it's still the right thing to put out, and that's what we try to do.
Amen. How long has your organization been around?
Been around since 1987, so I guess we're looking at 31 years right now.
Wow, that's powerful. And how do you describe your organization?
Well, we go back to the Bible book of Nehemiah. It's interesting when we say wall builders today, people think, oh, you're building the southern wall down there south of Tate. No, we're not doing immigration policy. This goes back to the Bible book of Nehemiah, and we use the name wall builders because Nehemiah called the people to rebuild the walls that have been torn down. It's the concept of rebuilding the things that have been torn down over time. We like that analogy because in the book of Nehemiah, that's the largest grassroots movement in the Bible. Wow. When people got involved in rebuilding their own communities around them, that nation got restored. Amen. And so we see help is coming from the bottom up, not from the top down. The other thing we do as part of that is we rebuild knowledge, and that's based on truth, which is based on history. And so we own about 120,000 originals or copies of original documents from before 1812. We have thousands of documents related to church history or political history or civil rights history or military history or whatever. And when you go back and look at things from the past, it is so different from what we're being told today that our past is. And that's the other thing we do is what we call historical reclamation.
Amen. So that's why having that information is so important, because you can refute the false information that's being spread about our history.
That's exactly right. And when you know it, it's also easy to rebuild. You got something to work with. Sometimes when you don't do that, you're trying to rebuild on a foundation of Jell-O, and that just doesn't hold up real well. It moves around. Amen. And so there is absolute truth, and knowing that helps both the rebuilding, and it also helps all the stuff we're trying to do today, quite frankly.
Amen. I would like to talk about your new book that you co-authored with James L. Garlow. Tell me a little about James.
Jim's a pastor. He's been a pastor for a long time. He just retired, or I can't say retired because the Bible doesn't condone retirement. He just changed positions. Yeah. So, God expects us to be productive as long as we're here on earth. And so he has been the senior pastor of Skyline Church in San Diego, a big church, great church, and he's a great preacher. But he also has so many other things going now. They've got a great ministry going to the United Nations for ambassadors and diplomats from other nations. Michelle Barton, former congresswoman, helps do that. They started several years ago church services at the U.S. Capitol with senators and representatives and other members of Congress. They've still got this ministry going on. It's also in several cabinet-level departments. They also have a big deal going on over in Israel with Christians and Jews working together there. So he's got a lot of irons in the fire. And so he's moved out of the active pastorate now and has picked up all these other things they've started in recent years and is now running them. But Jim, by official title, he's James, but we all call him Jim. He's just a great Bible teacher, Bible knowledge, great pastor, and just a great guy to co-author this book with.
And it sounds like you guys are a great combination. The title of your book is called This Precarious Moment, and it has about 62 chapters. It's divided into like 6 different sections and have over 500 footnotes. And it looks like to me, looking at the table of contents, that you were trying to put together an encyclopedic volume to aid the Christian conservative. Is that what your intention was?
Well, part of it, and part of it goes to our belief that there is absolute truth, despite the fact that right now polling in America shows that 2 out of 3 Americans believe there's no absolute truth, and 4 out of 5 millennials believe there's no absolute truth. We believe there is. And so a lot of what we say is contrary to what's often taught in colleges or what's often taught in the media or whatever else. And so we say, no. You need to go back and check this for yourself, and you need to see that there actually are facts. There are things that are hardcore evidence, and you need to base what you do on that. If you're going to have opinions and beliefs, put it on truth. And so because we believe that, we put these footnotes in there so that people can check, and we encourage them to do that. You know, I love the example of the Apostle Paul back in the book of Acts on his second missionary journey. He's the most academically credentialed guy in Christianity, hands down. I mean, he's the Pharisee. He had all the right teachers, Gamaliel, and he had all the right positions, and he would be like a university professor today with about 10 PhDs after his name. And he said he loved the Bereans because they never believed anything he said until they checked it out.
Amen.
And he said they search the scriptures every day. And so that's our position. We want people to know this is not just our opinion. This is what's based in fact, actual statistics, actual studies, actual history, actual whatever it is. And that's why we do so many footnotes to get it past being opinion. This is actually truth.
Amen. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to see a book like this after spending so many hours and day after day watching secular media influencing the public with misinformation, and the experience of being on social media and having conversations with people who have clearly been infected by leftist teaching. This book is like a godsend. And I was wondering, how are you marketing this?
Well, it's all over the nation in any kind of forum that sells books. And so it's an ebook, it's an audio book, Audible, things like that. It's up on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and all the major book distributors have it. It's done real well. It was the number one new release on Amazon, so the nation's responded pretty well to it. So it's out there in any national bookseller. We also have it at wallbuilders.com. So it's just available all over the country.
The first 4 sections of the book addresses racial healing, immigration, Israel, the millennials, all key issues of our day and time that are really horribly misunderstood by most Christians and church leaders. No thanks to the leftist media and our education system that is dominated by the left. How did you identify these particular issues as primary issues? And how did you put together such a precise outline for the subtopics of each chapter?
Well, we chose those issues because they're what has dominated the news in the last 12 to 18, 24 months. And a lot of these things, not only the news items, they are also tipping points that if we don't get it right, the odds are we do not continue to exist in the way we do. And that's not meant to be, melodramatic and hyperbole. I'll just give you one example. There is nowhere in history, 5,500 years of recorded history, thousands of nations that have existed. You cannot find a single example of a socialistic nation that has increased freedom and increased prosperity. Once a nation becomes socialistic, it becomes mediocre. It starts to move downward. It is not a world power. It then gets economic difficulties. It eventually will end up collapsing, and it will have a tyrannical form of government. Now, that's 5,500 years of recorded history. So we know that. There's no exception to that, and yet right now, of students in college right now, 75% prefer socialism to any other form of government.
Wow.
Now, that's our future leaders. And if America becomes socialistic, just mark it down. There's no nation to survive that. So this is precarious. This is dangerous. In the same way, among college students right now, you have actually 53% who think free speech should be limited. You should not be able to have your own opinion. 19% of college students right now think that violence is an acceptable response to free speech that they disagree with. So we can't even have dialogue. We can't even offer alternative views. We can't have a discussion between sides, because if I say something you don't like, I'm likely to get hurt for it. And these are trends that are not healthy in a nation. The polarization that is growing over race. What's happening with all of these issues. I mean, that's why we chose them. Because historically speaking and biblically speaking, if we don't get these things fixed and get them right, we're in some trouble. And by the way, we don't go into proposing national solutions. The president's got to fix this. Of course, we give every single individual something to do.
Amen.
And you get healthy from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Amen. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know for a fact that a lot of the condition that we're in right now is a result of our education system. Do you guys have a program to get into the education system to kind of help revamp things and get things back on track? Because they're really destroying us through our kids.
Man, are you right on that? Well, we kind of do, but we also have some problems with it. I mean, in my case, I've been appointed in a lot of states, the state boards of education, by governors, by legislators, others, to write history and social studies standards in those states. But there's so many of those standards that people don't like today. They disagree with, and so they want them gone. We're looking at a thing again where people don't care what the truth is; they care what their view and their opinion is.
Yes.
And so, while we work into that stuff, and while we can present that stuff, you're looking at a situation where the university professors today, they are radically opposed to all these things that have been shown to work previously. And even though they can give no examples where what they believe works, they still teach these kids that. So, one of the greatest things we find right now is this thing where the professors say, look, here's what the truth is, and if anybody tells you otherwise, you need to reject them out of hand as a bigot. Right? And so they have really inoculated these kids with it. When they hear an alternative opinion, they instantly reject it. And that's why you see some of the real physical responses you're seeing is because if I say something different than what the professor told them, they have been trained to react very aggressively against that. And so it's hard to have discussions, which is why, in the section of millennials, for example, we spend a lot of time showing how to reach people who have been trained to turn you off.
Amen.
And you do it the same way Jesus did it. You ask questions. And so, man, socialism is what we need. Okay, hey, that's interesting. Hey, can you give me an example of any socialistic nation in history where it's increased prosperity and freedom?
Excellent.
Well, they've never been asked that question. And say, hey, can you show me any example of a nation with socialism where it's increased the personal wealth of the people who are there? They can't do that. And so what you learn is that you start bridging the gap sometimes by asking questions.
Amen.
And millennials are so good. Millennials, I love millennials. They're such great leaders. You just have to get past the indoctrination they've had from education. And so I tell you, Denzel, you put your finger right on it. What they're getting in education right now is training them for not only things that are illogical, but it's training them to reject truth when they hear it.
Amen.
Which is why you have to change the way you present things to them.
Absolutely. Yes, I got you. That makes a lot of sense. And as an African American, I was grateful for your chapter, No Bitterness Allowed. I can't tell you how often I've seen people of my ethnicity who clearly allow bitterness to blind them from their Christian obligation. And I can tell you that I've seen some of them that even refuse to view current events honestly because of that bitterness. Am I correct in seeing bitterness as a deterrent from balanced judgment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we know from the Bible, and I'm speaking as a Christian and a historian as well, one of the things that we know from the Bible is the root of bitterness defiles many. It becomes a poison. And so it's really hard to be healthy when you got a poison running through your body. And so that was the admonition given by the apostles back in the Bible, that avoid the root of bitterness because it defiles many. And so when you get into that root of bitterness, what you're doing is you're hurting yourself. It doesn't affect those that you're bitter toward. It affects you.
Right.
It becomes an cancer that eats on you.
Amen.
And so being bitter doesn't change policy. It doesn't change the way the people believe. It changes you. And at that point, it's a real problem. And see, a lot of this bitterness happens. This is one thing education stirs up. There's a lot of bitterness, a lot of polarization, a lot of... And let me just kind of be politically incorrect here. And I'm going to jump into some areas that may cause some people to yell. But if we can agree that racism is a sin, if I can say racism is a sin, I think everybody would say yes. Then the next point I would make is, okay, if it's a sin, then it applies to every single human person.
That's right.
Sins are human problems. They're not, well, it's racism because of whites or blacks or, no.
Excellent.
Racism is a sin because it deals with the human heart. Well, if the heart is the problem, then that's what we need to focus on.
Amen.
And so you have to change the focus of racism. And I'll tell you, if racism, and let me just put it in perspective, there are only 4 races in the world. Anthropologists say there's only 4 races. There's 24,000 ethnicities.
Right.
The UN does not even use the word race anymore. What we call race, the black race, the white race, the Hispanic race, no, that's not right. Those are ethnicities.
Thank you.
So when you look at ethnicities and not race, here's the bottom line truth historically. Every single ethnicity, 24,000, has at some point in their history been slaves, and at some point in their history owned slaves.
And mistreated
Every
people.
one of them. And mistreated people.
Amen.
No question about it. Hands down. And let me be even more politically incorrect, because right now, what colleges and universities teach is racism can only be white on black.
That's crazy.
Can only be white on black.
Yes.
So let me just turn and just throw a couple stats out. At the time the Civil War began, when you look at free blacks in the South, like South Carolina, 40% of free blacks who were not slaves, 43% of free blacks owned black slaves.
Absolutely.
Now, wait a minute. How can that be white on black when it's black on black?
Amen.
You know, and so those are the facts that never come out, and that does not excuse racism anywhere. It's
Correct.
always a stand. You know, God is really clear. He looks at the inside, not the outside. He really doesn't care what color your skin is. He cares about your heart.
Amen.
And when Christians get to where they can look at the inside, not the outside, that's when things get well.
Amen.
And by the way, I have yet to see any college say, hey, by the way, did you guys know the Civil War was a bunch of white people going to war against white people to free black people? And that's never happened in the history of the world.
Amen.
You know?
Amen. I love it. I love it. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, David. You're absolutely correct. I love that, man. Another much needed area of understanding that is a complete disaster is this whole identity politics issue, which one of your chapters in the book deal with. This is what seems to be dominating left media, and I need to know from you, why is it that's so important for us to grasp the danger of identity politics?
Yeah, identity politics focuses on the outside, not the inside. And it goes back to this concept where the God, you know, Acts 17:26, he said, we're all descendants of one man, Adam. So I don't care where you are in the world today, you're my 150th cousin, because we've all had 150 generations. There's nobody in this world today that's not my cousin.
Amen.
I'm related to everybody. We all came from Adam. So when you look at it from that standpoint, and when you look at what 1 Samuel, God says, I look at the heart, I don't look at the outward appearance. You guys are concerned about outward appearance. What has happened since about the 1920s, we're into outward appearance. And so it's called identity politics. And if you look at Washington, D.C. today, I cannot point to a single lobbyist in Washington, D.C. who's there for the American people. But I can point to lobbyists who are there for gay or for straight or for union or for right to work or for seniors or for millennials. Or, you know, we're all in these groups, which is what leads to bad policy. God, for example, says, I treat everyone the same. I cause the rain to fall on the just and the unjust, the sun shines on the righteous and the wicked. And we look around and say, hey, we have to amend the Constitution in 1916 so we can start recognizing groups. So we do our tax policy based on groups.
Right.
Now, God says, hey, I want the rich and the poor to pay a 10% tithe. Now, the rich will always pay more than the poor, because if you make $100 million, you'll pay $10 million. If you make $10, you're going to pay $1, but everybody gets treated the same standard. And so what happened was we changed the Constitution and said, oh, no, we have to know what group you're from before we know how much to tax you. And so we started putting people in groups. Then in 2006, we had the hate crime laws that said, you know what? We want to create a hate crime law that says if you're homosexual or lesbian, you get greater protection than other people. And one of my friends in Congress said, well, while we're at it, let's also give protection to seniors and to veterans. And they said, no. Those aren't groups we want to protect. So we do things as groups now, and that's the way we do our immigration. It's crazy. Rather than saying, what do you believe? Do you believe, are your beliefs compatible? Will you help advance the beliefs that are so good? We say, no, we want 50,000 from Syria, and let's take 20,000 from this country. Well, guess what? There's bad people and good people in every country. I point to North Korea. You know, that's an enemy right now. But I'll guarantee you that there will be people from North Korea that we would want as immigrants because they're freedom-loving, they want to contribute, they want to be good. And I can point to allies like Great Britain, and there's people we don't want from Great Britain who have wrong philosophies and would tear America apart. So this identity politics, I mean, that is a bad deal, and it is not biblical because God doesn't look on the outside. He looks on the inside. But identity politics is now what dominates what we do in America, and that's bad. That's
right. Amen. I'm glad you guys added the last two chapters of your book, A Biblically Founded Nation, and Let the Church Be the Church, because it seems that they are like the foundation on which everything else stands on. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. You have to get the foundations right. And historically, so much of what we had in America that was positive came from biblical precepts and teachings. And they were given by preachers who stood up and did things right. You know, whether it's MLK, who's a preacher in the 60s, or whether it goes to a Charles Finney or a George Whitefield, or whether it goes the guy who signed the Bill of Rights. Only two guys signed the first 10 amendments. One is a preacher, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg. So we had all these great things. And you look at where we are now, and today the church is just almost not worth the powder to blow it up.
Amen.
And I say that somewhat facetiously, but I also say that statistically. We have 384,000 churches and senior pastors in America today, calling 500 to 600 every day, doing polling. 72% of churches say they do not believe the Bible. So right off the bat, you take out 300,000 churches. That leaves us 100,000 churches that do believe the Bible. And when you ask them, what do you think the Bible applies to? They'll say, well, the Bible gives clear guidance on immigration, gives clear guidance on race relations. The Bible gives clear guidance on education. It gives clear guidance on marriage and sexuality. And we say, great. And by the way, of that 28%, 90% of those pastors said, yeah, the Bible talks about those issues. Then we ask them, have you talked about those issues from the pulpit, or will you? 90% of the good guys say, no, we will not talk about those issues from the pulpit because they're political issues. Wait a minute. Time out. If they're in the Bible, how are they political? So we're looking right now today, only 2.8% of American pastors are willing to talk about issues that are in the news if they're also in the Bible. That's crazy.
Amen.
I mean, that's worthless. And that's why I say right now the church is just not, it's not even worth being an opponent anymore. And that's why the left doesn't really have to focus on it so much, because they're so weak and impotent. They haven't done much. And they're no longer the influence for good that they had been back in the civil rights movement or the abolition movement, back in any child labor, anything else. Nobody's scared of the church today. Nobody worries about it. And that's not the way it should be.
David, is part of the reason because a lot of the pastors aren't aware of the biblical connection to the way that our nation was founded?
Yeah, they are unaware, and that's one of the things we like to point out. I mean, if you go back and look, it's significant that political scientists have pointed out that of the 6 greatest intellectual thinkers in the American founding, 4 of the 6 were preachers. When you look at where we got our unique ideas, political science professors collected 15,000 key documents from the American founding to see where we got our ideas, because, I mean, quite frankly, we've been under the same Constitution for 231 years.
Amen.
So in the history of the world, the average length of the Constitution is only 17 years. So I was in Poland just a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of congressmen, and we were in Poland, a congressional delegation. We talked to people in Poland who have lived through 7 constitutions in their lifetime. We're still in our first. We just kind of take it for granted. So political science professors say, wow, where did these ideas come from? And they found out that of all the quotations in the American founding, 34% came out of the Bible. The Bible was by far the #1 most quoted source. And so if you don't know that, you'll let people talk you into saying, oh, no, we've always been secular. Hey, we don't want religious ideas. Well, guess what? We'll be like every other nation in the world and start having a new constitution every 17 years. That's just not what we want.
What has frustrated me most about our current state as a nation is the fact that Christians, due to their being so deeply influenced by the left media and by public education, have played a really big role in the deterioration of our morals and our social relations and even our spiritual condition. Besides the book that you've just written, this book that you've written, how can we as believers help to wake these people up who claim to be Christians and get them to understand who we are and how we're supposed to be functioning as believers in these last days?
Man, great question. And the way it is, to get back to things that actually worked in history, starting in the 1920s, the church really got into this mass everything, mass evangelism, mass conversion, mass whatever. And we measure everything today by numbers, even the amount of money that comes from the offering or how many people attend our church. And I've got a church of 70,000 people, whatever. Hey, Jesus had huge crowds. He had tens of thousands, but he spent more time with the 12 than he did with the tens of thousands.
Amen.
What changed the world wasn't the tens of thousands, it was the 12. It was those 12 disciples he trained.
Yes.
And so the answer is you start spending time with individuals and talking to individuals. Well, I want to talk to 150. Well, good for you, but why don't you start with just 1 or 2? And so it's that discipleship kind of concept. By the way, this is the way that millennials change so rapidly. They've been indoctrinated in education. Yes. But when you just sit down with them one-on-one to build a relationship, just a trust relationship, start asking questions, and don't be combative, and don't try to convert them, and just start asking questions. Be sincere. Have a conversation. It makes a huge difference, and that's what the church is not doing today. That's what the schools are not doing today. That's what educators are not doing. And this is how you make America healthy.
Amen.
You know, if every one of us would just go out and just touch 2 or 3 people and help them think through some things.
Amen.
Well, if every one of us did that, in about 4 or 5 years, the whole nation. And by the way, I'm just speaking as a Christian here for a moment. But if you take right now, 33% of the world identifies itself as Christian. Okay? If every Christian just led one person to Christ,
wow.
In 1 year, it would be 66% of the world. In 2 years, 100% of the world would be Christian if everybody just led one to Christ. And so what happens is, 2 years, we could have the whole world being Christian.
Absolutely.
Look, we've been working for 2,000 years just to get 33%, which means a whole lot of people aren't talking to anybody.
Amen. Amen.
What we know right now is that 67% of Christians do not share their faith with anyone else. Okay, well, that also works in history and everything else. If you're not going to talk to anybody else at all, how do you expect things to get better?
Amen.
But if you would change just one person, if you would just find one millennial or one pastor or one neighbor or one anything, and change it. If people would just do one at a time, you get this thing fixed. But in the 20th century, we're all captivated over numbers. I got a stadium with 100,000 people. Look how many people went to the football game. But no, that's not it.
Amen.
One person can change others. And so that's a great question.
Amen.
And that's what we have to do is change our mindset. Quit thinking big. Start thinking effectiveness. Just change one.
I received that, brother. Amen. The book is called This Precarious Moment. And I recommend this book to anybody, and everybody can get it. I'm going to be posting it on my websites, and I'm going to be sending it out, the title out to everybody I can get to encourage them to order it and buy it. I'm going to be doing a review of it on Amazon for you guys also. But David, listen, I love you guys. I love your organization. I'm looking forward to you guys doing some things here in New York City. I haven't heard you guys being out here. We are a very, very desperate need of wall building material. So if you guys ever have a desire to come out here in New York City, let me know. We can work this thing out somehow, man. Amen.
Man, brother, we're at your disposal. You just yell at us, tell us when, and we'll head that way. We'd love it. And thanks for all you do, too, man. Just bless your heart for where you are and what you believe and what you do for standing firm and strong. Thanks, Denzel. Appreciate it so much,
You're very welcome, brother. I'll be praying for you because I know you need prayer.
I will take it, and the same for you, too, brother.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you.
If you
Bye-bye.
only open your eyes, you can see the sign of the time.